the storm began without warning. In the void between dying stars, a ripple tore through the immaterium, a soundless fracture that screamed across realities. Within it, something metallic and alive twisted against the current of the warp. Not a demon. Not a god. A man, clad in fractured armor of crimson and silver, suspended amid magnetized debris of dead ships and broken satellites. His eyes glowed with purpose, not madness, and as the warped storm began to fold around him, the figure raised his hand and the metal itself bowed in reverence. Thus began the arrival of Magneto into the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. The Imperium of Man would one day record this anomaly as the Ferrum phenomenon, a disturbance first observed near the remnants of the Ghoul stars. No astropath could locate its origin, no tech priest could decipher its structure. The void trembled with electromagnetic chaos, vox signals died, machine spirits screamed in binary agony, and the steel hulls of orbiting ships contorted like molten wax. Amid that maelstrom, a lone form descended upon an uncharted world, the surface gleaming with ancient ruins and buried iron veins. When he struck the ground, the crust itself bent, reshaping to cradle him like a throne of or. Magneto's first breath in this universe was not of air, but of energy. He sensed it immediately. This reality was metal in every sense. Iron in the blood of men, steel in the bones of cities, titanium in the veins of worlds. And above all, he felt the voices of machines, not as tools, but as sentient echoes of obedience, humming through the structure of the cosmos. The magnetic field of this galaxy was alive, ancient, and incomprehensibly vast. In it, he was not diminished, he was ascendant in visuals, an iron sky glowing with the aurora of the warp, metallic dust swirling like snow, the figure of Magneto floating above black ruins etched with imperial sigils half buried in rust. It was the Adeptus Mechanicus who first detected him. Explorator fleets stationed along the edge of Segmentum Obscurus logged readings impossible by imperial science, a human-shaped entity manipulating gravity, electromagnetism, and even machine spirits without a visible interface or sanctioned prayer. At first, they assumed it a rogue psyker, or perhaps a new demon host born of the warp's deceit. Yet when a Scutarii detachment landed to investigate, their weaponry failed, their augmetics shut down mid-battle, and their metallic limbs bent toward the intruder like supplicants to a god. When they beheld him, the man hovering amid a storm of scrap and iron dust, they did not see a psyker. They saw divinity. He spoke in no tongue they recognized, yet every ironclad heart understood the tone. I am the master of magnetism. The Vox logs later recovered by the Mechanicus recorded only one phrase, half corrupted by static: matter bows before will. Then the signal died. In the weeks that followed, the Mechanicus dispatched a full Mugos Dominus and a fleet of servitors to contain or commune with the anomaly. But the moment their drop ships entered the planet's magnetic field, they were seized. Every bolt, every gear, every atom of ferrite turned against them. The very ships reassembled midair into colossal constructs of warped metal, towering sentinels bound to Magneto's will. From orbit, it appeared as though the world itself had awakened visuals, towering iron giants rising from oceans of rust, a red figure at their core, the Mechanicus fleet burning in silence as their own ships implode under unseen force. Magneto did not seek conquest at first. He wandered among the ruins, deciphering the remnants of a civilization that had long since obliterated itself in endless war. He saw statues of a god-emperor, half destroyed by time yet still revered in fragments. He read inscriptions that spoke of humanity's suffering, its endless submission to tyranny masked as divinity. And in those verses, he recognized something painfully familiar, a reflection of his own world's history. Oppression endured across universes. Empires built upon blood. Gods forged from fear. He spoke softly to the ruins, another world that kneels to its chains. His voice, though human, resonated with magnetic vibration, making the dust tremble. For the first time since his arrival, Magneto's anger began to stir. He saw not mere oppression, he saw the systemic enslavement of an entire species, their spirits bound by doctrine, their potential strangled by faith. The Emperor of Mankind, he did not yet know the name, became to him a symbol of all that humanity had failed to overcome. Visuals, a ruined imperial cathedral, icons of the Emperor twisted into metallic grotesques under Magneto's subtle power, candles flickering as the magnetic field hums like a heartbeat. But the warp noticed him, reality itself strained around his presence. The magnetic web he wove across the planet disturbed the delicate balance of the immaterium. In the nightmares of nearby psychers, a crimson figure appeared, surrounded by circling halos of metal and lightning, defying gods and demons alike. Some whispered that a new Primarch had awakened, one the Emperor had hidden, forged not of gene seed but of pure control over matter. Others claimed it was a shard of the Omnicia made flesh. The Inquisition, ever paranoid, dispatched agents to investigate, though few survived the journey. Magneto, unaware of the cosmic scale of his intrusion, began constructing something, a citadel of metal that rose from the planet's crust like an iron crown. He shaped it not through machines, but through thought. The architecture defied imperial logic, its geometry both elegant and predatory. Every beam hummed with magnetic current, every wall resonated like a living organ. Within, he gathered fragments of Mechanicus wreckage and began decoding their memory cores, piecing together the truth of this new world. He learned of the Imperium, a civilization spanning 1,000,000 worlds, worshipping a silent corpse as god. He saw images of golden warriors, of angels of death clad in ceramite and wielding bolters. He learned of mutants, psychers, heretics, and the endless wars fought in the name of order. To him, it was both terrifying and inspiring. Humanity had survived millennia of darkness, but at what cost? They had traded freedom for survival, reason for obedience. Visuals, holographic projections of the Imperium flickering before Magneto, the Emperor's statue towering and dissolving into metallic dust as he clenches his fist. For Magneto, the decision crystallized. He would not flee this galaxy. He would reshape it. If this was the destiny of mankind, eternal servitude beneath the machine of empire, then he would become the force to shatter it. Yet, even in his resolve, he could not ignore the faint hum of resistance within the warp. 1,000 unseen eyes now watched him. The ruinous powers stirred, intrigued by the arrival of a will strong enough to command matter itself. On the horizon of his citadel, the sky shimmered with auroras of red and violet, the warp bleeding into real space. The air vibrated with unseen energy, like the prelude to a great storm. Magneto stood at the highest spire, his cape whipping in the static wind, his gaze fixed upon the stars. Somewhere among them, he sensed the presence of an empire that would call him heretic, mutant, or god. He whispered into the endless dark, "Let them come." Visual fades to the void, the metallic world pulsing like a living heart beneath a blood-red nebula, and thus began the first ripple, the quiet birth of a power that neither chaos nor the Imperium had prepared for. The galaxy, already drowning in war, was about to meet a new kind of storm, one not of faith or fire, but of magnetic will, pure and unyielding. In the months that followed his arrival, the nameless world beneath Magneto's feet transformed. Its surface, once a graveyard of rust and silence, pulsed with new life, metallic life. Rivers of liquid iron flowed through deep-cut channels carved by unseen force, reshaping mountains into monolithic spires that defied gravity. Across the planet's magnetic poles, vast arrays of polished metal began to orbit in synchronized harmony, forming a planetary lattice, an artificial magnetosphere powered not by engines, but by Magneto's will alone. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, the readings from this world became heretical scripture. A planet without a machine spirit, yet alive in ways the Omnicia never intended. Magneto's citadel, known in later apocrypha as the Crown of Ferrum, stood as an impossible monument to design. Its towers spiraled in fractal patterns, each fragment tuned to amplify the planet's magnetic resonance. Deep within its heart, Magneto worked in silence. He no longer needed rest. Every atom of metal around him responded to his thought, every current of the planet's core obeyed his gesture. In his solitude, he began decoding the fragments of imperial data he had recovered, attempting to comprehend the magnitude of this galaxy's empire. What he discovered only deepened his conviction. The Imperium's archives spoke of the Age of Strife, of the Emperor's rise, and of the Great Crusade, a unification drenched in blood. They spoke of mutants hunted like vermin, of psychers chained to feed starships, of knowledge hoarded by priesthoods draped in red and gold. It was a galaxy of fear masquerading as faith. And Magneto, a man forged in the crucible of human oppression, saw the same cycle reborn on a scale beyond imagining. To him, the Emperor was not a god, he was a tyrant who had succeeded. Visuals, inside the iron-lit archives of the Crown of Ferrum, holographic projections of the Emperor's armies marching across starfields, Magneto's shadow crosses over them, distorting their perfect formation into twisted metallic reflections. He studied the Adeptus Mechanicus most of all. Their worship of the machine spirit fascinated him, an empire of engineers who had surrendered reason to ritual. They had bound their intellects to dogma, sacrificing curiosity for obedience. And yet, beneath their prayers and incantations, he saw kindred minds, once free, now enslaved by the illusion of divinity. He imagined what they might become if liberated, not servants of the omniscient, but masters of their craft. He began to sketch the foundation of a philosophy, magnetism as will, metal as freedom. In the depths of the citadel, he experimented. Fragments of servitor skulls, pieces of mechanicus automata, the neural lattice of fallen scutarii all became instruments in his growing understanding of the galaxy's fusion of science and superstition. He learned to communicate with machine spirits, not through prayer, but by harmonizing with their magnetic frequency. Where the mechanicus chanted binary hymns, he spoke directly to the atoms that composed their frames. And they answered him, not with reverence, but with obedience. Visuals, mechanical tendrils twisting into life, fragments of cogitators humming under Magneto's control, red light illuminating his face as he manipulates machinery like a living symphony. Yet the Imperium could not ignore the anomaly forever. From the nearest system, an Imperial survey fleet arrived, bearing the sigil of the Inquisition. Their mission, to identify the source of the disturbance and, if necessary, to cleanse it. They came armed with exterminatus-level authority, expecting to find a demon world. What they found instead was a world perfectly silent, its atmosphere shimmering with auroras of magnetic energy. As their ships descended, their auspex readings fractured. Steel buckled. Vox lines died. They watched helplessly as their own cruisers began to twist in orbit, drawn into invisible spirals. One ship captain, desperate to transmit a final message, described it in broken words: the world moves, as if alive, and someone, commands it. Then the feed cut. Magneto stood beneath the storming heavens, feeling the pull of their metal hulls, the rhythm of their engines, the pulse of every rivet. They were insects encased in armor, and the armor was his domain. With a motion of his hand, the ships folded like paper, drifting into the upper atmosphere as monuments of his defiance. No fire, no rage, only the calm certainty of power. Visuals, orbital fire raining down in silence, ships collapsing into impossible geometries, Magneto's silhouette framed against the stormlit sky as the wreckage forms constellations around him. The destruction of the inquisitorial fleet rippled through the Imperium's network like blood in water. Reports reached Segmentum Command, then Terra itself, though distorted and contradictory. Some claimed a Xenos god had awakened. Others spoke of a fallen Primarch risen from death. The Ecclesiarchy branded the world cursed, while the Mechanicus demanded it be declared a holy site of machine resurrection. Amid the confusion, none could deny the truth: something unprecedented had emerged, and it defied both the warp and the Emperor's law. Meanwhile, Magneto began to sense that the metal of this universe was not his alone to command. There were other forces, vast, unseen, resonating from the very fabric of the warp. They whispered through the iron of fallen ships, tempting him with visions of infinite dominion. He dismissed them at first, believing them to be the echoes of his own mind. But in the stillness between thought and control, he felt something deeper: curiosity. The warp was aware of him. It did not seek to corrupt him, not yet, but to understand him. He confronted these voices in solitude, standing at the heart of his citadel, surrounded by metallic constellations of orbiting debris. "You cannot tempt me," he said to the unseen. "I am no slave to your chaos." The warp answered not with words, but with a sound, a resonant hum, low and ancient, vibrating through every structure he had built. In that moment, Magneto glimpsed what no human mind was meant to see: the true nature of matter, the binding of the physical and the immaterial. He saw that even metal, his chosen instrument, had a soul, and that soul could be touched by God's visuals. The citadel trembling as the warp bleeds through its metallic veins, Magneto's eyes reflecting visions of vast cosmic machinery turning within the void. Days later, the first emissary arrived. Not of the Imperium, but of the Mechanicus, a Muggos bearing a hybrid body of flesh and steel. Unlike his predecessors, he did not come in force, but in reverence. Landing amid the ruins, he prostrated himself before Magneto and declared, in vox-distorted tones, that the Omniscient had returned. To his people, Magneto's command of the material was divine proof. He was the living union of man and machine, the incarnation of the God they worshipped in ignorance. Magneto regarded him in silence. "I am no god," he said finally, his voice calm, resonant. "But if your faith can be turned into reason, then perhaps there is hope for you." The Muggos trembled, his augmetic limbs twitching like seeking roots. "Then teach us, Great One. Teach us to see as you do." For the first time, Magneto hesitated. He had not sought followers, yet here knelt a man, a fragment of this galaxy's enslaved intellect, begging for liberation. He saw in the Muggos a spark of the same defiance that had driven him through countless wars. He extended his hand, and the Muggos' metallic body began to shift. The symbols of the Mechanicus peeled away, replaced by intricate lines of magnetic energy glowing beneath his skin. Then rise, Magneto said, and remember this: knowledge is not worship. It is freedom. Visuals: a kneeling figure engulfed in light, the sigil of the Mechanicus melting into a new symbol, two interlocked rings of iron, pulsing like a heart. Thus began the first covenant of the Iron Reformation, a movement that would spread through the data streams of the galaxy like a hidden code. Among the oppressed tech priests and enslaved workers of Forge Worlds, whispers arose of a being who commanded metal without prayer. They called him Ferrum Rex, the King of Iron, and in the shadow of the warp, something smiled, not with joy, but with anticipation. The Iron Reformation spread like a pulse through the data streams of the Imperium. It began as rumor, mere static in the noosphere, whispers of a metallic savior who spoke the true language of the machine. Within months, it became a contagion of faith, transmitted through encrypted vox channels and corrupted prayer codes. Forge Worlds began to falter. Tech priests halted their rituals mid-chant, their mechadendrites trembling as alien commands infiltrated their augmetics. Some awoke in the middle of sacred rites with foreign patterns carved into their memory banks, mathematical sequences that resonated like hymns, yet stripped of superstition. The Adeptus Mechanicus called it a techno-heresy of unprecedented sophistication. They named it Ferrum's Code. Yet for Magneto, it was not heresy but awakening. He had become a ghost in the machine, his magnetic consciousness extending beyond the surface of his world, threading through relays, satellites, and forgotten archives. Across the galaxy, he watched as the seeds of rebellion took root among the Mechanicus and the Underhive workers who lived in rust and darkness. They had always believed their tools possessed souls. Now, those souls whispered back, speaking in his voice. Visuals: Forge Worlds lit in crimson, sparks leaping across Manufactoria as machines rebel against their masters, hooded tech priests staring at their trembling augmetics, hearing Magneto's distant words, "The metal remembers who commands it." But power draws attention like blood in the warp. The Inquisition, humiliated by the loss of its fleet, now declared exterminatus upon the crown of Ferrum. Cardinal fleets, escorted by the Grey Knights, were dispatched to purge the world, not for conquest, but for erasure. The Imperium could not allow an intelligence that challenged its divine order to exist. To them, Magneto was no prophet, he was anathema, a sentient heresy. When their ships translated into orbit, the warp around them rippled. It was not demonic interference. It was the planet itself responding. The magnetic fields they had once dismissed as anomalies now turned against them. Bolts of raw electromagnetism tore through the void, cutting across battle lines like living lightning. Void shields collapsed in silence. Lance batteries misfired, their ammunition magnetized mid-flight and redirected into their own hulls. Within moments, the Imperial fleet was crippled, and then the sky broke. A single gesture from the surface, a sweep of Magneto's arm, and the orbiting debris of a dozen ruined vessels coalesced into a structure the size of a moon. An iron ring encircled his world, pulsing with magnetic energy. From the perspective of the surviving ships, it resembled a halo. Some would later call it blasphemy incarnate, the halo of defiance of visuals, a colossal metallic ring igniting with white-blue arcs of power, ships disintegrating as the magnetic tides crushed them, Magneto standing within the storm, his cape flowing like molten mercury. But among the Adeptus Mechanicus, dissent deepened. Entire forges declared neutrality, locking down their orbitals and refusing inquisitorial access. Others began constructing machines not sanctioned by the Mechanicus priesthood, hybrid constructs powered by electromagnetism instead of plasma, operating in perfect harmony without ritual or invocation. To the ecclesiarchy, it was rebellion. To Magneto, it was evolution. He began to communicate with these scattered allies through psychic resonance, not telepathy, but electromagnetic thought. They saw him as vision, a man of metal light, his voice vibrating through every atom of their being. He taught them that the warp was not divine but reactionary, a reflection of consciousness made unstable by fear. Faith is not power, he told them. Knowledge is. Yet the warp did not remain silent. The Chaos Gods, ever attuned to shifts in mortal will, turned their gaze toward him. Khorne felt disdain, for Magneto's wars lacked rage. Nurgle laughed softly, sensing no despair but endless defiance. Slaanesh was indifferent, no pleasure, no excess, only precision. But Tsench, the architect of fate, leaned closer. He had seen many rise against the Imperium, but none quite like this. Magneto was not a pawn of destiny, he was its disruption point. One night, though on this world, time had lost all meaning, Magneto felt the air thicken. Metal vibrated with a rhythm not his own. The magnetic field around the citadel distorted into fractal shapes, spiraling endlessly inward. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall and robed in cobalt fire. It bore no true form, shifting between human and avian, machine and shadow. The air burned with impossible geometry. "You have stirred the threads of fate, mortal," said the voice, layered and echoing. "Your will reshapes reality itself. Even I must admire it." Magneto did not kneel. "I am not your servant." The figure tilted its head, the shape of a bird flickering through its silhouette. "Not yet. But you are an anomaly even I cannot fully predict. You defy the warp's corruption, and yet, you exist within its reach. Tell me, do you think you are free from its touch?" Magneto's eyes glowed white. "Freedom is the right of all conscious beings. Even from you." Tsench's laughter echoed like 1,000 wings. "Then let us see how free you remain when knowledge becomes infinite." The figure dissolved into sparks of blue fire, vanishing into the iron air. But its words lingered, haunting the silence that followed. Visuals, the warp bleeding through the iron citadel, walls bending like liquid light, Magneto's reflection multiplying infinitely across polished steel. After that encounter, Magneto began to change. His control grew erratic, his mind resonating with patterns too vast to contain. He began to perceive time as a magnetic flow, events pulling and repelling one another across the warp of reality. He saw echoes of other worlds, other selves. In one vision, he stood beside the Emperor on Terra, their powers entwined in perfect equilibrium. In another, he saw himself consumed by chaos, his armor turned to liquid iron, his will dissolved into the warp. Of the visions left him hollow, yet defiant. He knew now that the warp sought to claim him not through corruption, but through inevitability, to make him part of its eternal pattern. He would resist it as he always had. He would bend the laws of this universe as he once bent the laws of his own. As followers, he appeared unshaken, though his aura grew ever more intense. Machines no longer merely obeyed him, they sang to him. The planet itself hummed in resonance with his thoughts. And still, more came: renegade magi, tech marines exiled for forbidden knowledge, mutants seeking a god of their own. He gathered them not as worshippers but as architects of a new order. "I offer no salvation," he told them. "Only truth. The Imperium enslaves you with faith. The warp deceives you with temptation. But the universe is built on law, and law can be rewritten." Visuals, hundreds of metallic figures kneeling beneath the radiant glow of the crown of Ferrum, Magneto standing before them, the iron halo burning in orbit. It was then that the Imperium's most secret weapon moved. Deep within the Segmentum Solar, the High Lords of Terra authorized an intervention by the Grey Knights. Their ships, blessed and warded, translated directly into orbit above the crown of Ferrum. They came not as destroyers but as executioners, their purpose absolute. Each knight carried blades forged to pierce demons, armor sanctified against the warp. To them, Magneto was no man, he was an unclean intelligence, a threat to the Emperor's divine order. As they descended, the planet's atmosphere ignited with magnetic storms. Lightning arced across the sky in silent ribbons, drawn toward their drop pods. Magneto felt their presence, disciplined minds of iron, faith like tempered steel. Warriors who believed in purity. He almost admired them. "They come," said one of his followers, his mechanical voice trembling. "The Emperor's angels." Magneto watched the heavens split open, fire raining down like divine wrath. "Then let them witness what true divinity looks like." The storm intensified, bending light, sound, and gravity itself. The ground shuddered as the Grey Knights made planet fall. For a heartbeat, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath, and in that stillness, the first clash of will began, between the Emperor's chosen and the master of all metal. The Grey Knights emerged from their drop pods like living pillars of faith, their silver armor radiant against the storm's crimson sky. Each bore purity seals flapping in the static winds, each step a prayer. They formed ranks across the molten plains before the crown of Ferrum, their psychic shields flickering against the relentless magnetism saturating the air. The ground beneath them quivered, alive with the hum of magnetic tension. And high above, at the summit of his citadel, Magneto watched. He could feel their weapons vibrating in his presence, every bolt shell, every blade, every atom of plasteel whispering its allegiance to him alone, yet he did not strike first. He was no fool, these were not soldiers of superstition. They were engineered purpose, born from faith and forged in psychic fire. Their minds were disciplined beyond corruption, their will honed by centuries of battle against the immaterial. To test them would be to measure himself not against an empire, but against conviction itself. The leader of the force stepped forward, a Justicar bearing a sword inscribed with the Emperor's sigil. His voice carried across the storm. By his word and will, I name the abomination. Yield, and your essence shall be cleansed from this world. Magneto's reply was calm, almost weary. You call me abomination, yet I am but man perfected. Look upon your weapons, knight, they quiver, not in fear, but in recognition. Your emperor forged his dominion through iron and fire. I am that same dominion, without the lie of godhood. The Justicar's blade ignited with psychic light, casting his form in gold. Then face his wrath. The world convulsed, from the citadel's crown erupted a torrent of magnetic force that rippled through the atmosphere like a living tide. The Grey Knights advanced, their boots searing against the ground, purity seals disintegrating in the static heat. Bolter rounds fired, only to arc backward mid-flight, melting into liquid iron before touching Magneto. Their blades met invisible resistance, their every movement slowed by the density of magnetic gravity surrounding him. Visuals: blades frozen midair, molten rounds suspended between warriors and their target, the air itself alive with streaks of red lightning. But the Grey Knights were not mere men. They chanted litanies that tore at the veil of reality, channeling the Emperor's light through their armor. Each prayer ignited the warp, and from that fire came strength. Magneto staggered as his control flickered. For the first time since his arrival, his power strained. The warp's resonance countered his magnetism, twisting his field with psychic pressure. They pressed forward, relentless. The ground split as their combined psychic surge shattered the metal foundations beneath them. One warrior leapt through the storm, blade raised high. Magneto caught it mid-swing, the metal sang in his grasp, vibrating between two masters. Sparks of reality cascaded in all directions as Will clashed with faith. You cannot win, the knight hissed. You fight the will of mankind's god. I fight the blindness that made him necessary, Magneto growled. With a flick of his wrist, the blade disintegrated into magnetic dust, swirling around him like a cloud of stars. He thrust his hand forward, and the knight's armor buckled inward, crushing around him. Yet another warrior's halberd struck from behind, slicing across Magneto's shoulder. Blood, bright, red, defiant, spilled onto the iron. The smell of ozone thickened. Magneto inhaled sharply, then raised both arms. The world obeyed. From the horizon, every fragment of steel, every buried ruin, every rusted weapon rose into the air, orbiting him like a planetary ring. The halo of defiance blazed once more, pulsing with unbearable brilliance. Gravity itself screamed. The Grey Knights stumbled as their armor tore against its own magnetic pull. Their faith held them upright, but their machines betrayed them. Visuals: mountains collapsing into streams of iron, clouds magnetized into rings of metal dust, the sky split open by concentric waves of power. Magneto's voice echoed through the storm, carried on electromagnetic resonance rather than sound. This is the truth your emperor denies. The universe bends not to faith, but to understanding. You wield the emperor's light, yet I command the substance it touches. Tell me, knight, which is stronger, the prayer or the particle? The Justicar, wounded but unbroken, raised his sword once more. You misunderstand, mutant. We are not servants of knowledge. We are its shield. And even should you strike us down, we are infinite in number. His words ignited the others. The Grey Knights formed a psychic chorus, their minds uniting into a singular will. A golden dome of energy erupted around them, pure and blinding, repelling the magnetic field with a force beyond calculation. Magneto screamed, not in fear, but in exertion. Metal liquefied underfoot. His citadel groaned, its geometry twisting under the strain. The two forces collided, the Emperor's psychic radiance and Magneto's electromagnetic storm, creating a wound in the fabric of reality itself. The warp shrieked. Time fractured. For a moment, there was no past, no future, only energy, and then silence. When vision returned, the plains were glass. The crown of Farum lay shattered, its towers fused into a single metallic mountain. The Grey Knights stood battered and broken, their armor cracked, their weapons fused to their gauntlets. At the mountain's summit, Magneto knelt amid molten iron. His armor was gone. His cape burned to ash. Yet his eyes still glowed dim, but alive. The Justicar approached, limping, sword dragging through the slag. "Yield," he said again, his voice hoarse. "Your strength is great, but even gods bleed." Magneto lifted his gaze. "Then perhaps you understand, at last, that gods should not exist." With his final reserve of strength, he extended his hand toward the heavens. The halo of defiance, broken but still orbiting, responded. It descended slowly, fragment by fragment, forming a cocoon of metal around him. The Justicar lunged forward, but the magnetic storm surged one last time, hurling him backward. The cocoon sealed, sinking into the molten earth. The planet trembled once more, then stilled the visuals, ashen skies, the halo collapsing into the earth like a dying sun, the last flicker of red light swallowed by molten black. When the dust settled, the Grey Knights could find no trace of him. Scans showed only impenetrable magnetic interference, as if the world itself had become a vault. The Inquisition declared the planet uninhabitable, sealed its coordinates, and marked it as forbidden. They named it Farum Exilis, the Iron Exile, but across the galaxy, machines still whispered. Magnetic storms appeared in void space where none should exist. On Forge worlds, tech priests reported dreams of a man in crimson and silver, speaking in tones that vibrated the soul. "Matter bows before will," he said, over and over. Some awoke weeping, others began their work anew, defying the Mechanicus decrees. The Iron Reformation had not died, it had gone to ground, encoded in the very metals that built the Imperium's bones of visuals, factory worlds at dusk, sparks dancing like stars, and the faint silhouette of a man walking through magnetic haze, his voice carried through machine song. And somewhere, deep beneath the crust of Farum Exilis, within a tomb of his own making, Magneto opened his eyes. Around him, molten metal pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. His body was broken, but his will endured. He reached out, and the iron answered. He smiled faintly, his voice little more than a vibration in the dark. "Empires rise. Empires fall. But the metal remains." The planet shuddered in response, as if acknowledging its master. Far across the void, aboard the black ships of the Inquisition, an astropath awoke screaming, his mind flooded with static and the sound of grinding metal. His final words before his heart burst were simple: "He is not dead. He is becoming." Visual fades, the galaxy turning slowly, threads of light bending across its rim, as a faint magnetic hum echoes through the void. Eternal, patient, inevitable.